Welcome to another live stream. We're going to talk about the paradox of gang stalking, and we're gonna look into the old topic of gaslighting. Gotta love that. You can't have gang stalking without gaslighting. And targeted individuals deal. I mean, the things that happen to targets are unbelievable. It's gaslighting 101. When you start to doubt anything, that's really where the invasion is. I mean, of course, targeted individuals deal with trauma. We're going to talk about all these things, but even when you're dealing with a narcissist or someone who, in a hypothetical example, does something and then denies that, depending on how much time that they've put into, love bombing you or deceiving you, you might question yourself. I didn't say that. I didn't do that. But they did. But they're insistent. Maybe you're dealing with a group of people like targeted individuals. You're not just dealing with some narcissist that has invaded your life, although they do. You are dealing with a type of group dynamic. Not only are you being told that what you're experiencing is not happening to you, that you're hallucinating or that you're just imagining these things, you're told by many people. People in your family, people at your workplace, people at the hospital. Doctors may have told you that you are mentally ill, that you are suffering from the sequelae of a mental disease. Targeted individuals, sometimes they reach out to get help. It's only logical. The framework that you are given as you're growing up, as you're introduced into this world, does not involve the possibility of something like group mobbing or gang stalking. Okay. Especially when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it and you really see what's going on in this world. I've talked about that before for targeted individuals. It sucks to be harassed. It really, it goes into your family even. We're going to talk about those things. It's painful. All the hopes and dreams that you have or had come crashing in, and you have to kind of recapitulate. You have to reorganize, and that's your view of reality. Because to be perfectly honest with you, the beginning of this whole thing involves that framework, right? That's not possible. There can't be people out there who are, spiritually influenced or so evil that, they would literally, invade your life and maybe even spend years or something like that, gaining your trust only to gaslight you, traumatize you, and disassociate you. But it happens. And sometimes they're just taken over by spiritual forces or technology or something like that. But from what I've seen, there are people out there who know about these things. A lot of targets will think back and remember, little comments or strange things they couldn't figure out. They didn't know. What's wrong with this person? Why'd they say that to me? Right. Later, we're going to drive you crazy, or we're not allowed to do that yet, but you're going to find out later. What are you talking about? You think that maybe they need some, rest. Maybe they go take a nap. Maybe they're on something. You don't know. And then you start experiencing things as a target. And, like I said, the framework is that these things aren't there. If you were to tell something to someone out there who doesn't know about gang stalking, all the things you're dealing with as a victim of group mobbing or gang stalking, they wouldn't think it was possible. The classic questions come, well, why would you be so important? How much money would these people? I mean, they could be out doing anything. You say that they're after you. Why would people target you? Why, you know, and there is no explanation. And, you have to understand that, a lot of, I don't know, lateral comparison framework and, the whole idea of mind control and controlling the populations, coercing people, creating a hierarchy with information that other people don't have. There's a lot of people out there who are just completely blind to what's going on. They are given disinformation, right? The whole idea of demoralizing someone after they start to wake up. And like the themes of gang stalking, it's a lot of targets will, they'll be real shocked because it seems like it's everywhere. And really it always was. You're not flipping into a different reality. You're just waking up to what was there, but it's the framework, right? So the framework of your landscape doesn't involve these possibilities and impossibilities. These possibilities and impossibilities. People out there are going to have no idea what's going on, right? They are given disinformation and they believe it, right? It's like the secret societies, and I've talked about that. You have the spiritual realm, and then you have the individuals who are given knowledge. I've talked about technology coming to mankind from the spiritual dimension. I'm not against tech. I realize there's all kinds of things going on. That's where it came from. It's not, spells and voodoo, all this. Most of that stuff that we have gotten, and when you go into the Ethiopian Book of Enoch, is technological. It's wisdom. It's knowledge. Okay, things like that happen when you look at what Hitler was doing. He was into the occult, and a lot of the stuff that he was going to use, the Messerschmitt, the first jet fighter, all the other things, it's just beyond. Okay, but that hierarchy is created. That's part of the illusion. You don't know about that. A lot of targets, they try to figure out what's happening, and they don't know. Is it these people getting together? Are they getting together online? Are they getting together down at the damn gymnasium? What's going on? How is all this stuff happening? Are they in collusion? They got to be, but how? These people are saying this one thing to me, or they're doing this, this set of different things, the stimuli, the things that the target individual is sensitized to, and they're just messing with me. Who are they? And you have a hierarchy created. How do you do it? People know. They have an inside track on different things. They know about the disinformation out there. They know that the media is pushing one narrative and it's bullshit. They know the truth about maybe the food that we're eating, or the fluoride or whatever. They know about gang stalking. They know about driving people crazy. They know about gaslighting you, and they're playing a game. They know. There's different compartmentalizations involved in this whole thing. But when you get in to the science of gang stalking, it's just basic gaslighting. Like I said, you could be dealing with a group of people, which is worse, or you could just be dealing with an individual. But they gain your trust, maybe even through love bombing. And the paradox of that is that the more they give you, they're telling you whatever you want to hear. They're validating you. They get you feeling like you're on a high. And well, the paradox is the more they give, the more they can take away. Right? Because usually a narcissist will isolate you. They will maybe even triangulate you later. But you will be dependent upon them, right? They will take you out of balance. A lot of times people talk about failed marriages, and one of the things is that one of the individuals in that relationship doesn't have a life. They don't have any support mechanism or any relationships outside of the marriage, and that person becomes responsible for everything. The other, their significant other has to do it all the time. And the imbalance creates other problems, and then it doesn't work. And it's like when people say that, and some couples can get away with that. They can work together they can go to work together, and they run a business or whatever, and they do. But a lot of times that's just, it's just not going to work. But isolating the individual is crucial, because you're taking away those support mechanisms and everything. You have more control. Not only have you invaded their life, and of course they want the individual to become vulnerable, to feel safe, but you've trusted them. You're getting your chain yanked by a bunch of strangers with street theater. It might be scary. It might prick your ego or something like that. But in order to really get you emotional and mess with you, you have to have the infiltrator. You have to have someone who's close to you to really be offended, right? To have that emotional currency, that emotional response. And I've talked about, the traumatic mind control involved in gang stalking, and that's how they get in there. It's like a chemical tattoo on your brain, right? And all the associations around it. I've used examples like 9/11 or some other very traumatic event, and people have very vivid memories, and they have the associations in those memories. So we'll say that during that episode that unfolded when the Twin Towers were attacked. I'm not even going to go into the truth about that right now. And I don't know, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. We'll say that you were cooking, you were baking toast, or maybe someone was mowing the lawn next door. Well, the smells, that environmental stimuli is going to be connected now for the rest of that person's life. When they smell the fresh cut grass, or somebody is making toast or something like that for breakfast, they'll have a literal trigger point. They'll have a flashback of 9/11, of that day, what the weather looked like, what people were doing. They'll remember it very vividly. It's an invasion into your mind, right? The associations can cause those triggers, and the whole thing is to turn your brain against you. It's turning you against you. Gaslighting is the same way. I didn't do that. You're misremembering. Even if you know what happened, especially in that group dynamic, even if you doubt just a little bit, just a little, that's all it takes. That's all it takes. And that little flicker in your mind can turn into a flame. It can turn into a forest fire, and the invasion in your mind is complete. Because the other paradox is that the smarter you are, and the more sane you are, stable, the worse the gaslighting is. If you were to approach a delusional individual and gaslight, it wouldn't even matter. It wouldn't matter. Nothing would matter. The fact that you have a rational mind that is trying to make sense of their little game and that doesn't make any sense, that's the mechanism they use. That's the paradox. And the more you look into the whole thing, the more information that you collaborate around the event, the more confusing it can be. That's, of course, the classic stages of demoralization. All right? Someone starts to doubt, and so they look into the matter. What happens? They're trusting other people for their information. I Googled it, and it said it was good for me. And I looked again, and it said it was bad. I don't know what to believe. Confusion. Doubt. Well, the doctor said I was crazy. And the people were telling me I needed help, but I know what they're doing. Yeah, you do, Billy. You remember it correctly. Well, why would they do that? Because they're controlling you. They're a bunch of blood-sucking vampires. That's why. And then the individual has to deal with, a very, manipulative scenario at that point. Do they even want to know the truth? There's people out there that have mentioned things like that to me. What if what you're saying is true, If what you targeted individuals are talking about is true, I don't want to know. I go crazy. Your mind is trying to organize something that is chaotic, and it gives them the upper hand because it leads to confusion. It leads to more information. It leads to the possibility of disinformation, and the accumulation of data just adds more possibilities to your scenario, which inevitably just feeds that fuel, that fire of doubt. You don't know what to believe anymore. You don't know why they're after you. You don't know what is happening. But yet, your mind is going to keep going with it. The sensitization process is basically the same way. Was that person, were they messing with me? You don't know. Because they will use things in your environment that you're going to run into. Is that person just need to change their headlight, or are they following me? Is that one of the perps? Is that person acting all cocky and flamboyant and doing all these things and waving at me with the red shirt? Is that person am I just reading into this? All these people, really? I don't know. Maybe I should go see the doctor and a lot of targets. They will tell someone and say, well, okay, but maybe you should ask a professional. Problem is that nobody knows about this stuff. The people that know about it are in on it. The catch-22, right? The individuals who don't know about it don't even believe it could happen. And that flicker of doubt is the beginning of that gaslighting, because it's only going to get worse, right? When you experience this and it completely contradicts the conceptual framework of your mind of what's possible, all of a sudden all these people are, they don't have any idea what you're talking about. You know what's going on, right? It is possible. A lot of targets get gaslighted in a different way, to the point where, you move into that other paradox, and that is, can the truth even be known? Because once you get into that place where you're questioning everything and you look into it, the only thing is next, am I ever even going to find out what's happening? Who's right? I only got so much time in this life. I'm so busy dealing with all these things, and that's when it really gets tricky. It's the reptilians. It's it's aliens from outer space. This goes into religion too. By the way, happy Easter. I've talked about the spiritual foundations of gangstalking, and it's absolutely something that you cannot leave out. You cannot leave that out. And when you get into what happened on Calvary, the crucifixion of Jesus and who he was, he has basically got the title deed of the earth back. And there is a time, and I've talked about that before, where the gospel, the good news, is going out, and that's a 2,000-year age. According to the Dead Sea Scrolls, we are on the last 50 years. And when the Lord returns, there's going to be no more gangstalking. Hallelujah to that. All these things will be brought to light. One of the hardest things for targets to deal with is that sense of injustice. These things are going to be put in order. It's not if, it's when. Sooner the better. Sooner the better. But the fact that people start to question whether the truth can even be known, it's the same with religion. You got all the religions out. Well, these people say that, and the other people say the other thing, and Christianity turns into just another option. That data is compiled together. Well, how do you know Allah's not God? Well, you have to look into these things. You have to understand prophecy and so on and so forth. And it's important to do that. And I've talked about those things that, that's one of the aspects of gaslighting, because they will tell you they're just going to get away with this thing. There isn't any judgment. We're just going to die. There's no resurrection, and well, there is. And, some of the people just believe they were going to hell anyway, and they just do it. Some of those people are the most cruel, dangerous individuals you're going to run into. And they're going to get that, I guess, that wish that, I guess that's what they wanted. And some of them go sooner than others. I've mentioned that before. It's real confusing when you see the prosperity of the wicked, because it just seems like the good guys always lose, or the people that try to do the right thing, it just doesn't work. It doesn't pay. And Psalm 73, the servant of the Lord, his heart almost failed when he saw the prosperity of the wicked. But then he went into the house of the Lord and saw the end of them. But of course, it requires faith to believe that's going to happen. And then one of the qualifiers of salvation is faith. Faith is not magical. It's what you believe. Gaslighting. Right? What do you believe? All right, that's what they do. They ramp up the environmental tyranny to the point where people don't know what is true. They get demoralized. They start to question whether truth can even be known. You get I think that's the Gnostic theme, right? Or the agnostic, excuse me, not the Gnostics. The agnostic, it can't be known. We can't figure it out. And it's classic. I mean, a lot of targets, they get gang stalked at church, right? It's like the Lutheran Synod, the machine, where they would, this classic gang stalking. In my opinion, they just got caught, right? Using group harassment techniques on individuals, gaslighting them, confusing them, discrediting them, isolating them, driving them crazy, or driving them away. And they invade. So there's people that have talked about individuals in cults, witchcraft, or whatever, that are literally sent to churches to cause trouble, to harass people. And there's a lot of them that, I mean, I've seen it. I've seen that kind of thing. And targets deal with that, and sometimes they're gaslighted there too, and they're made to feel guilty about that whole thing, and that's not good. That's not okay. And if you're one of those people that have been gang stalked in church or have dealt with that type of group bobbing, that wasn't God, okay? And he is using the foolishness of preaching the gospel, and sometimes he even uses his enemies. And this is not a work that is done by man. You're not going to call anyone father or rabbi, but the Spirit is going to lead you. God's going to teach you, right? God is not a debtor to anyone. He's able to bring these things to pass. And a lot of people will get disillusioned when they see all the different churches disagreeing, and all the people that are mean to them or evil or contradictive in the church. But that's not really the church. The church is people who believe in Christ by faith. Like the scripture said, Jesus said, the meek shall inherit the earth, and the pure of heart shall see the face of God. He doesn't need some human being or a bunch of gurus to get out there and do this for him. He can do it without that. And he's put faithful teachers and individuals who have wisdom all over the place. In a multitude of teachers, you will have wisdom, right? And if you seek it with all your heart, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. One of the biggest benefits of being a target individual is really seeing what's going on, rather than to be disillusioned, rather than to be confused. You're brought into clarity, right? But you have to see the gaslighting, because, like I said, one of the paradoxes is the more information or the more intelligent the individual, the more they're going to try and rationalize and compartmentalize these things together. All right, you're trying to figure out something, and they've got you on a wild goose chase, right? Why? You get disinformation campaigns. You get all these things that happen with targets that are discredited, the smear campaign, rumors, whatever, and you get into such a vulnerable state of emotional manipulation. Especially when it comes to the family. A lot of you guys are not with family today on Easter because they're in on it, because you've been attacked, or they don't understand you, or you can't deal with it. A lot of stuff going on but of course you're just nuts. You're, whatever. They might be painting you one way or the other. It's unfortunate, but that has an effect. That has that reciprocity of that emotional reaction. And when people believe that the disinformation campaign, the smear campaign, or the people just thinking they're crazy or whatever, it gets to them. You can't worry about that. Like I said, you have to remember that eventually this stuff is going to come out. It's not if, it's when. And the more rational and intelligent you are, the paradox is the easier it is to gaslight you. I mean, they will turn your brain against you, right? Like I said, it just takes that flicker of doubt. You deal with people, like I said, who start to derealize, and they get in a place where the truth can't be known. I don't even know. This is a hologram, man. We're in a simulation. It's not real. Can't be real. These people they're robots. They're clones or something. That's not my relative. That's not my friend. Who are those people? And they'll flip back and forth. Targets deal with a surreal, chaotic environment. Sometimes people are spiritually influenced, literally possessed or oppressed. Other times they're fake. They're lying. They have, it's just another mask that you haven't seen yet. And they take it off. They have the go ahead. You're marked as a target individual, and you move into their geographical area, or they just start doing it, and you didn't know. You had no idea. And that's the way it works. Once you get to that place where you doubt, you move in to the investigation, compiling the data, then you move in to that inevitable area of scrutiny. And the worst part about it is they can get you to start scrutinizing yourself. The targeted individual believes they're being watched constantly. They can't go to the bathroom. They can't take a shower. They're cooking dinner. They think that all these people are just looking at them, scrutinizing everything they do. And they get the target to process information in a personal way, not only so that they will read into their environment and start looking for this and emotionally exhaust themselves, turning them against themselves, but that eventually they'll start criticizing themselves. They've turned you into your own worst enemy. You believe all these things, and it's the emotional currency that comes out of that whole thing, and it also preps you for that persecutory delusion. I dare you to tell someone you're suffering from a delusion of grandeur. Why are you so important? Boy, the government's doing all this. You're what? You're some kind of Manchurian candidate? What are they spending hundreds of millions of dollars to coordinate all these people to chase you across the United States? Really? Not possible. You're suffering from some kind of persecutory. You're a chosen one. Oh, that's what. Who? The targeted individuals say that you're the chosen ones. So you're special. I've talked about the danger of trying to figure out what's happening to you, because a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of reasons why people are gang stalked. It might be because of your faith. It might be. But then you got to figure out what a chosen person is. You're chosen in Christ. You're in Christ by faith. He was chosen as the method of reconciliation. Right? You're predestined to be conformed into his image, not predestined to be a believer. And you are predestined to the adoption of children, which is the redemption of your body. You're chosen one. What you sound like you're suffering from a persecutory delusion. People think they're helping out targets because it makes them feel good. I'm chosen. Preachers who don't know how to read the Bible. Did you know God chose you before the foundation of the world? Taking Ephesians 1:4 and 1:5 out of context. Now we've got a mystery and another paradox. Why is that a problem? Because if you don't think you're one of the chosen ones, you ain't got no hope. You ain't got any faith. And if you don't have hope that God is going to be fair and that he is offering to give you something that he is offering through the gospel, it's not good news and it's nothing. There is no faith. And the environmental tyranny has the power over you. Things are going well. I must be one of the chosen. Yippee. What about Billy over there? I don't know. I think God passed over him. Maybe he's a vessel of wrath. He's not one of the chosen. Ridiculous. And even though it feels good, like the paradox involved in love bombing and gaslighting, the more they give, the more they can take away. You believe that someone loves you and you start to depend on them, and then they start giving you the silent treatment. Maybe they start to stonewall you. Maybe they start playing games with you. The silent treatment. Ooh, it doesn't feel good no more. No. And that's what they do. Oh, you're one of the elect. You're one of the chosen. Well, I don't know. Who are you to question God? Isn't it wonderful, though? And then all of a sudden things start happening around that individual that might indicate that they're not. Oh, I'm sorry. The more they give, the more they take away, and they rely on that feeling. Right? You get a narcissist or a love bomber or a group of people that are going to gaslight the targeted individual. One of the things that they'll do is they'll make you feel good because you start paying attention to them. You care what they think, right? That's another thing that targets deal with is their harassment flips around. I love you, I hate you. I love you, I hate you. Nicholas Bosserman told me about that one, and he experienced some very intense gang stalking to the point where he's paraplegic now, literally. I don't know whether it was some kind of demonic attack or maybe something technological, but he got hit by a train, some type of attack where he just became disoriented and confused, literally blacked out, and woke up. Paramedics, trying to help him out. Go figure that one. But he was dealing with that stuff, very intense electronic harassment. And one of the games he said that he played was I love you, I hate you. They do that. They do that to all targets, right? I think my gang stalking stopped. I'm going to go live my life again. Blat, they come and smash the sandcastle. No, I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying that your gang stalking can't end or that God can't do something or work it out. But you have to be realistic. You have to know what's going on. The point is they will use that, right? And then it makes you doubt even more. That's the forest fire that inevitably takes you into that place where you don't even know what's going on, right? That's how this whole thing works. One day people are just sweet, opening the door for you. Oh, how you doing, bud? Beautiful. Oh, yeah. What are you doing this weekend? Have a good day. And then the next time you walk in that business or see those individuals or whatever, they got these scowls. They're doing things. They might be trying to trigger you or mumbling loud enough for you to hear. We're going to drive you nuts. We're going to get you. Oh, yeah. Hey, have a good one. Yeah. I'm going to, they like to play. But they'll take you into that. The more they give, the more they take away. And like I said, if you were crazy, it wouldn't work. Wouldn't even matter. There would be no sequelae. The sequelae would already be there. But as you're trying to compile these things together and make sense of this whole thing, that's the problem. And the fact that you're surrounded by these people, like I said, it's a group dynamic, is even worse. And the other thing that you have to really be careful of is the game dynamic. I talked to a target about that yesterday. It says, God, I don't think I'm ever going to beat these people. How can we win? Well, you don't win that way. Right? You can't control what other people are doing. They've conspired against you. They maybe have, you're in that stage of triangulation or whatever. And you can't control that. You know, it's a trick. Because once you try to solve this whole thing, they just have that much more power over you because you can't control them. Right? You can't. But you do have power over something else. You can't believe that. Don't give them what they want. This is not a contest. It's not a game. There's no chivalry involved in being mobbed and being ganged up on. Oh no, you're not, you know, that's you're not losing. You're still winning then too. They're just a bunch of bullies. The whole thing's gonna come out later, but you just don't give them what they want. You're not paying attention. You see who's around you. You've awakened as a target individual, and you realize the fickleness of this world. Unfortunately, a lot of the things that you thought were there are not there. Right? Feeds into the gaslighting. Reality is different than you thought it was. The people are easily manipulated, and I've talked about the isolation that targeted individuals deal with. It's kind of a liability. You have to have realistic expectations and realize the frailty of the individuals around you. Some of them, you know, I mean, people think the government's paying all these people or whatever, or, you know, your family today, the CIA must have contacted my grandma. You know, I don't think so. Sometimes this stuff is spiritual. You want to talk about technology, they got stuff will blow your mind, literally. It's not all, you know, ghouls and ghosts and abracadabra. It's tech. We don't even have all the information. But a targeted individual can be hit with all those different things at once. You can be dealing with things that are invisible. You can be dealing with the perps, the you know, the puppets, and you can, you know, have a sudden onset of anxiety. You're dealing with different things like you know, sensations in your body. Your ear will start ringing. In fact, there was a I can't remember what the show was. They were basically showing how someone can be gaslighted very quickly, and they arranged it was like a get together, a conference, and a type of retreat or something, and they had all these people come in. Of course, they had questionnaires and so on and so forth, and they would subject them secretly to stimuli during the initial stages when they would ask them questions, and when the person got a wrong, when they gave a wrong answer, they would hit a little doorbell. It would sound as if it was just something that was in the background. They would make it sound like it was something that was just coincidentally happening every time that person answered a wrong question. Ding. And, you know, after about the fourth or fifth time, you could see these people looking around like, what is that? Well, that has nothing to do with you. That has nothing to do with you. And they would keep doing that. And they started doing it to them, you know, during the, you know, the indoctrination phase where these people were living at this place. They go into group therapy and everything else. And then they started really playing games with them. And they would give them tranquilizers or something. They would knock them out or wait till they were asleep. And they would sneak in, and they would take this one guy. They took him out and they put him on the front lawn in his pajamas. And he wakes up out there on the grass, you know, the birds are singing. And people are like, "What are you doing? Oh my gosh, you have no idea what." And then, you know, people were acting angry and everything. Yeah, and he came in my room too. And this person is just, you know, I don't even know, how did I get out here? And of course, you know, he's surrounded by these people. We saw you do this. We saw you do that. What are you doing? And of course, you know, maybe he's suffering from amnesia. He didn't know. And of course, he would answer and then all of a sudden the doorbell would come on. And so they took this guy into a place where he didn't know what was real. Right? They got him to doubt himself. Targeted individuals are taken into the menagerie of gaslighting and the paradoxes, the methodology, the science around it is they invade your mind and turn you against yourself and then convince you that it's you. a lot of targets will believe that these people are trying to help them. It's too painful to conceive or fathom the idea that individuals would do this type of thing. It's not it's just not in their salient landscape. It's not part of their conceptual framework. It's painful. It's my family. I thought they loved me. Why are they doing this to me? Why are they framing me? Why are they gaslighting me? Why are these people doing this? That's one of the most troubling questions for targeted individuals. You don't know. And it lasts for a long time. You are arguing with yourself. Did that really happen? Maybe I am going crazy. And the other real confusing aspect is that some of the people that are gaslighting you are victims of gaslighting. They believe the lies. All right? They believe it. When you get into the family dynamic of, the golden child and the black sheep, and targeted individuals, they fall into that area of the black sheep. But when they start using you as a scapegoat, or that individual in that family dynamic, the people start believing their own bullshit. Like that individual is really the cause of all these things. They'll start believing it. People talk about going no contact. It can be very difficult. And, I've talked about that before. When you're dealing with family, it causes more problems, at least for me, than it's solved. You just have to put up boundaries and realize who you're dealing with, because there's really no getting away. You try to eliminate pain. You think that you have control or whatever, and you end up just, walking into a different trap. That's the worst part about this. And then, if somebody, passes away or whatever, the other people who are in your family that aren't involved in this whole thing, they just believe the lies. Yeah, that person doesn't care. They're a good for nothing. They don't care about us. They think they're better or whatever. They're crazy, or they're on drugs, and when they see the individual just disappear, and of course they're going to be experiencing the sequelae of the harassment too. They just believe it. You don't want to help them out, but you try to have some control. You want to have control over your environment, and that's one of the tricks that they use to get you trying to play their little game and play whack-a-mole. But you're trying to eliminate the pain, and you just end up walking into something else. But you can do whatever you want. Sometimes you have to do it very carefully. And I've talked about this before. As far as Resurrection Sunday, Jesus rose from the dead. That there are targets out there, and I think this happens a lot, to where, because at first you get attacked and you don't know what's going on. It's not uncommon for targets to have a psychosis or have some real serious problems, and instead of getting committed to a mental institution or something, you just maybe you go quiet, or somehow you survive it. Or if you're a believer, God brings you through it. And it might even be a long time. You might even be impaired. I was for decades. I ended up getting on tranquilizers, and my IQ went down to like 60 or 70. And they really toyed with me, targeting individuals who, get involved in trying to get rid of the pain, sometimes get into, taking meds, or maybe even, drugs or whatever. And you get into that area of addiction. They'll really, rake you over the coals, and they're doing it to help you. And now it's just one more thing that they can use as an axiomatic catalyst to gaslight you. But the whole idea is for you to believe the lie, right? The gang stalkers that triangulate you not only are they getting you to doubt yourself, but they are framing you. You know, they're bringing other people in on it because, you know, when you have a family situation, especially, you have that much more emotional manipulation. And, you know, for targets, you know, who experience that type of higher level of gang stalking, that could take you out. And like I said, they thought they were going to get you to kill yourself, or that you know, you'd be put into a mental institution. But here you are, you're still alive, and you're not crazy. All right, you remember all the things that happened, and you know that you weren't hallucinating it. You know, you're not, you know, suffering from schizophrenia or something. Oh, they don't like that. And like I said, you got to be real careful how you deal with them, because they'll try to put you back in the grave. Right? They'll try whatever they can, because you know who they are now. A lot of them are real cocky too. You're gonna lose your keys at the hospital, buddy. They used to do that one to me. We're gonna drive you crazy. Just walking down the street, they start yelling, 20 years in a mental institution. And I was like, God, who are these people? They're just doing all this weird stuff around you. But you know, it didn't happen. Some of that manipulation will come in when targets deal with that spiritual stuff. You know, I've talked about that with, you know, the Ouija boards and everything, or, you know, the false prophets, and some of that stuff, you know, it comes to pass, and you wonder. That's how they bewitch the secret societies. They have a destiny philosophy. They have, you know, familial prophecies and all that stuff. Some of the most accurate things that I've ever heard came out of the occult, but that's just divine manipulation, right? And it's just there to deceive and gaslight people into believing something is not true. It's propositional tyranny. But you know, then you start wondering, is all that other stuff going to happen? It doesn't. It can change. God could deliver people out of this, and but you know, they want you to believe that whole thing. And they, if nothing else, they want to cause fear. You know, that just breeds. That's the medium of all the other things that they use for that trauma invasion into your mind, right? But you're back from the dead. If you're one of those targets who's been doing this for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, they don't like that. And when you see who the narcissist is, or you see the perp, the gang stalker, and you know, they don't want people to know. They don't have any power over you anymore. You know what's going on. They can't gaslight you anymore. I've talked about that before, that when you don't react when you're dealing with this whole thing, they've got to get aggressive. They've got to get obvious. If you're one of those new targets and you're out there and people are telling you to confront your gang stalkers or play some game with, don't do it. You don't see anything. You're not seeing any of it. None of it. Because you want them to get aggressive. It is a lot more valuable to have a very aggressive, obvious day of harassment than most targets give credit, because they're just frustrated. They say, you would believe what just happened. It was so obvious. They're so stupid. I can't believe. Good. Now you know what's going on. Sometimes it gets subtle. Sometimes it'll be subtle for years. I've talked about that before. There's people out there who believe they're nuts. They don't know what's happening because they're not. You're as a target. You're brought in on the fact that you're being hunted. They want you to know. They're toying with you. They want to play. They want to chase you around. And they like that. It gives them a sense of power. And it also creates that medium of that game dynamic. You got to win. And of course, they love that because they have control then, but you're winning in a different way. And when you don't react, they have to get aggressive. It kills the gaslighting. Oh man, you wouldn't believe what happened. Well, that sucks, but it's also good because now, without a shadow of a doubt, when you want to anchor yourself, as if you start to slip, if you start reading into things, because they'll turn you against yourself. You start wondering, am I being paranoid? Yeah, of course you're paranoid. Of course you are. Anybody who's dealing with the stuff that you're dealing with is going to be paranoid. Period. But you got to remember those things, and it accumulates just like all the other stuff. I mean, this is a process of accumulation and reciprocity. The associations amalgamate out. That's how trauma works. It's just like what I talked about at the beginning of the video. You have a traumatic event, the stimuli is connected to that, it turns into a trigger. Those triggers, they breed other triggers, and then you're consumed. It's all you think about. Targeted individuals should try to forget about this stuff as much as possible. You're not trying to organize it and figure it out. You're not trying to control it. You know what it is. It's manipulation, gaslighting. They're blood-sucking vampires. Okay? Don't try to dress it up. Don't try to sugarcoat it. Don't try to overcomplicate it. That's what it is. It's manipulation. It's cannibalism. They're murderers. Some of them are confused. That's not your problem. Okay? And if you make this too complex, you're gonna get into that area of disinformation. You're gonna get into that area. Not only are you starting to question yourself, but whether you can even know what's going on. That's what's going on. Okay? Some people are being experimented on. Some people are just being, you're getting the life sucked out of them. Some of them are vessels of wrath. You work right into that social dynamic, and they need that. One of the most contradictive things about the gang stalkers is that they could be doing anything with their time, but they are doing this. It's not something that normal people would do. They could be out having fun. They're spending their God-given time and resources to do this. That's not normal. Okay, they have to do it for some reason. However it's manifesting. Maybe they're getting paid. Maybe they're getting some type of emotional kick out of it. I don't know. It's different in all cases, and sometimes all those things can be involved. But that's contradictive. It's also contradictive to get angry with someone and tell someone they're crazy, because, of course, if they really were, they would have no control over that, would they? Paradoxes and contradictions on every side. I'm going to go into the comments. I'm going to see who's out there. And my arm is getting pretty sore. C, welcome to the live stream. Saratoga, welcome to the live stream. Steve the Pigeon, welcome to the live stream. And Steve says they love saying, why would anybody do this to you? Yeah, they do. And okay. And we have some other comments in here. Okay. I'm just reading some of the comments here. Okay, C says the tech is beyond simple rice-sized chip in your head. They operate beyond that with scalar waves. Interesting. It's kind of, it's interesting to try and figure out the technology involved in this stuff. We have different sources that are out there. But the thing that I was talking about with the target the other day, I was because, there was a lady that she was claiming to have an implant in her brain. And you could see this thing on this, scan. And a lot of people would say, well, how'd they get this thing in your brain? I mean, there's no scars. You think they'd have to cut your head open or something, or, shove something in there somehow. But really, technically, theoretically, if you could get, the nanoparticles and you could control them to create different structures, if you will, migrating through your body, technically, theoretically, you could probably get an implant just from something like that, and it would kind of, structure together within, the individual. A lot of people were speculating about that type of stuff being in like chemtrails or food, or even things that could possibly be injected into an individual or something like that, or things they would eat or whatever. But however it gets in there, whether you're breathing it in or whatever, after that's there, you could literally kind of turn the individual into an RFID chip, because you think, well, how is it powered? How could you power up a chip? Well, you could hit it with RF, right? Just like an RFID chip, a passive RFID chip. The human would literally become something that can communicate. And the weird, I'm not saying that's what's going on. I'm just saying when you think about this stuff, it gets pretty trippy. So you wouldn't even really have to slice somebody open and put an implant, which they do that kind of thing. Either that or they want you to believe it. I've seen stuff like that, to where people, they have something and it's like they got a lump, or, maybe they wake up and the lump has been cut out, literally. I've seen that kind of thing, literally. And it's you don't know. But I think I would agree they're beyond that, and they've got some pretty interesting stuff out there speculatively. And technology is definitely used against targeted individuals. Okay, let's see what else is out here. And CL says neural linguistic programming. Everybody with the media controls all their indoctrinated systems to do this bidding. I believe that. That's a good one there. Yeah, that's part of the menagerie. That's part of that landscape, to where it's the theme-based activity that target individuals start noticing. It really freaks you out, because now it's everywhere. And a target, a lot of people would consider that a form of controlled programming, where they turn on the news or something, and it's like, they're watching that target or whatever, or they hear keywords or phrases or something, maybe over a radio broadcast or whatever, or maybe something even in a movie. And it's like they're in a matrix. They're thrown into the meat grinder at that point, and they got to realize that it's gaslighting on a mass level. Right, a different type of gaslighting. I've talked about that with the Mandela effect, is that you have that whole thing set up where you have different movie versions and different versions of things, Fruit Loops, or whatever, Looney Tunes or whatever, and you remember both, because I remember it spelled this way, and I also remember it spelled that way, or I remember this being in a movie, or I remember Darth Vader saying, "Luke, I'm your father," and the way I remember the other, and the whole idea is to throw that element of doubt out there. It's gaslighting, and now they're trying to convince people that the government has time travel, and they're teleporting, people everywhere and doing all these weird things. I don't believe that. I believe that's gaslighting too, and the Mandela effect, stuff like that, has people believing that. Right? They're going back in time and changing things. No, they set that up. They set it up, and they're gaslighting people in mass. And they know about it. It's like that hierarchy that I talked about earlier, is that you got people that know this stuff, man. They're playing games and they're laughing. Oh, look. Look at that. Look at the bandana on the Karate Kid. Was you notice anything? They're snickering or whatever. I had that one back in the 80s before anybody was even talking about it. So I know that there's people out there that know this stuff, and they laugh. That's how they create the hierarchy, is that they have that information. They know the little scheme or whatever, and they, just watching you, your eyes are like saucers, and you go, wait a minute, I don't remember that. And they just laugh. They love that kind of thing. And you'll figure it out. But now the government is got the power of time travel. Baloney. Gaslighting. Douglas 777, welcome to the live stream. Bill Deagle, yeah, interesting. Yeah, he was talking about a lot of this stuff way before anybody else was. I'm not necessarily on par with some of his religious concepts, but He had some real interesting information on bioweapons. And let's see here. Lord be a lamp unto my feet. Welcome to the live stream. Okay. Catherine Grimes, welcome. And let's see here. Jack, welcome. And Steve the Pigeon says, back around 10 o'clock, yep, I've been told I'm delusional when trying to seek help, even though I've had obvious video evidence. So you even have evidence. That's interesting. I've talked about that before with targets. There was a guy that I saw in the hospital, and I've talked about this story before. They wheeled him in a wheelchair and shot him up with Invega. The guy was basically comatose for 3 days. The first words out of his mouth were, "I'm not crazy." I'm just, I'm his roommate up there getting ready to go to detox. And I had a really bad tranquilizer addiction. And he says, I'm not crazy. And I start talking to this guy, and he starts rummaging around over in his things. And he takes out these pieces of folded up paper. They chased him all the way down to Mexico. It's almost like the movie The Game, literally, for real. And he was a real interesting looking individual, about 6'3", silver eyes that glowed in the dark. I've never seen anybody with eyes like that. It almost made me wonder if there was some kind of genetic thing going on with his targeting. But he pulls this paperwork out, and he's like, they took my money. I showed the doctors. They keep telling me, and somebody hacked his bank account, took all the money out. Literally, the doctors. He's like, they won't even look. They won't. I showed him all this stuff. He had all kinds of things. And it's, and I said, okay, you got to realize what's going on. And I told him, it just blew his mind. He was dealing with everything. I don't even know what happened to him. Hope he's doing well. But that's the kind of thing that happens. The nurses even came in the middle of the night. We're laying there asleep. They come in and flip on the light, 2 of them, and they start, dancing around with their hands up in the air. We're going to be here forever. And then they just looked at us and then turned the light off and walked out. This guy had no idea what was going on. And now, if I would have tried to tell anybody that, guess what they would have said? No, that never happened. Maybe you're crazy. Here you are, and a type of psych center thing. You got to go there before you go up to the treatment center, because what they'll do is they'll kind of taper you down a little bit on the medications that you're trying to get away from. But of course, it's your word against people who are professional. You have the Stanford experiment stuff coming out there. You're crazy. You're just delusional. Okay, I'm going to go all the way back up at the top and see what you guys are doing here. Okay. All right. Where dolls don't dance, welcome to the live stream. Where dolls dance. Sorry. I didn't mean to do that. You're hallucinating. No. Okay. All right. Well, there's a lot of interesting comments out there in the live stream, but we're talking about the paradoxes of gangstalking, and there are a lot of them there. It's one of the things that they'll do is they'll just try to convince you that they're helping you too, and that goes along with what we just talked about. You're crazy. You just need our help. Yeah. The more you know, The more information you get, the more they can turn this whole mechanism against you. And like I said, you got to keep this whole thing simple. And they want you to believe that everybody is watching and that everybody knows and all this stuff. And that's part of the way that targets end up processing information. They get all that attention. And you got to watch that as a target. You want it to stay as small as possible, simplify your life, don't react to these things. And remember that when you do that, you're canceling out this whole process of gaslighting you. And another thing that the narcissist will do is in that love bombing, they'll get you to get all emotional and ooey gooey and feeling good. And then, of course, you're chasing that feeling again, and because they validated you, they got in and lied to you and got you to believe that their mask was real and that they really cared about you, and but it's kind of like a drug. You got addicted to the feeling, right? It felt so good, and you're dependent on them. I've talked about the fact that the narcissist will isolate you. And in gangstalking, the same thing happens because you're isolated. You become very vulnerable, and then they'll send a narcissist or a honeypot, or you'll just fall victim to one or whatever, or you will need their validation, these people around you, because they'll start gaslighting you, especially if you're dealing with family, especially if you're needy, and getting sabotaged and financially struggling. And then they'll get you chasing that, you need their validation. You need them to even be real. Take your meds, Billy. And then they'll stop attacking the individual. And then when they do start attacking them again, they'll say, well, maybe you need different meds or something like that. But it's easier for the target to believe that or to give into it just because it's too much bullshit to deal with them, And a lot of targets will play into that game dynamic and the way they're just trying to get their life back. Of course we are, but you have to be realistic. You're never going back to that world that was never there. Now you've been to the sausage factory, so to speak, and you know what's going on. There's no getting out of it. Okay. And yes, you can thrive, you can have a life. And I've talked about the fact that I believe that the next 7 years could be really good. I mean, that's what the Dead Sea Scrolls have communicated about the final Jubilee or 50-year period of the Age of Grace. And the first Shemitah, which you have 7 times 7 is 49. The 50th year is a Jubilee year. And the first Shemitah is supposed to be really good. Maybe gangstalking will be exposed. That's what I'm hoping. There's a lot of people that are talking about this stuff now that weren't talking about it before. I mean, there's a whole community of people out there. When I started dealing with this stuff, there was no one there. I dealt with this stuff for the first, 28, 29 years without any kind of validation at all. Sometimes I wondered if I was the only person. It's like being lost in outer space or something. But they'll take that and they will use it. And when targets are trying to rebuild that, I don't know, that world that never existed, they're just trying to get back. Of course, they just want peace. They just want homeostasis. They want control again. They want to have hope for the future. You do. But it's not the same. It's just different. Right? And you have to learn to be grateful and be satisfied in the things that you have and appreciate the things that they are taking for granted. And I've mentioned that before, that as a targeted individual, you're gonna find that power to appreciate and enjoy the simple things that they can't enjoy. Like I said, they could be doing anything with their time and resources. Look at them. They're pathetic. It's sick. And they have to do it. You don't want to be like them. You don't have to. You can look at yourself in the mirror, and you don't have to think that about yourself. You don't have to become a zombie. You don't have to drink the blood. You don't have to be a vampire. You can just be you, and you can appreciate the simple things. And, really when it comes to, salvation and stuff like that, the communion that people have with God is underestimated. We don't even know exactly what that'll be. But the whole idea of him living inside you and you being, transformed and conformed to the image of the second person of the Trinity, right? When Jesus said, I pray that they may be one with us as we are one. You don't want to take that lightly. That's a very intense communion with God, and you grow closer to him through this experience. And it's the simple things. God has come into space-time, put his throne on earth, and the Bible says that he is lowly and he is meek and lowly. He is actively seeking a relationship with you, to have that communion, to have a family, right? Simple things. And they are taking those things for granted, and unfortunately they are forfeiting their future. But you can have those things. Maybe right now you're in a small apartment, or maybe you're even living in a camper or something like that, but you still have more than they do. And when you look in the mirror, you like your reflection. And that's important. That's important. I'm going to go back into the comments. Oh, it looks like on average Joe's going out for a hike. Enjoy yourself, and hopefully you'll be safe out there. True peace and security. Welcome to the live stream. And Saratoga says all this does is provoke reckless behavior, violence, suicide, incarceration, and institutionalization. Yeah. And that's true. The whole idea of getting you emotional and, throwing you into that game dynamic is to frustrate you. That sense of injustice builds. You're trying to figure this out. You need to win. You got to win. But you don't. You win a different way, and you make your life simple, and you don't react. You follow protocols. You neutralize what they are doing, and you win everything. It just doesn't look like it. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it. And sometimes you have to lose to win, but you're really not losing. Rather than to try and stand up for yourself and get provoked, maybe incarcerated or institutionalized or thrown in for an evaluation, you're just not reacting. Because if you get emotional, that's the power they have over you. You don't give it to them. And it's not easy sometimes. I have to remind myself of these things all the time. Okay. Well, let's see here. Well, let's see. We're talking about one of my favorite topics, and that's gaslighting. And, you'll deal with that type of triangulation too, because it's different with gangstalking, because you're dealing with multiple people. Usually the triangulation example involves another person that comes into the scenario and creates a different dynamic. But really, it's just that type of peer pressure. And when someone experiences this whole thing as a targeted individual, you're going to have a lot of different stimuli and opinions about it, but they're going to follow that same basic theme because of that type of conceptual framework. Some of the people that get drawn into your gangstalking are not really involved the way you think they are. And I've mentioned that's part of the propositional tyranny, is that you use syllogistic conclusions to process the information around that, like maybe somebody at an accident scene messes with you. They didn't set up that. The perp happened to be a firefighter, or it happened to be somebody who was a first responder or a police officer or maybe a doctor or whatever. It doesn't mean the Freemasons are putting a contract out on you. They probably don't even know who you are. But you might have dealt with somebody who was manipulated or whatever that happened to be a Freemason. That's just, you got to see what you're up against. That's what makes people look nuts. Start burning down Freemason lodges, or saying the cops are, in charge of this whole thing, or whatever. It's like your view is correct in the sense that you see who's messing with you, but you have come to the syllogistic conclusion leading to propositional tyranny about all of it, right? Some Freemasons can be gangstalkers, but not all Freemasons are gangstalkers, right? Whatever. It's the same thing. It's no different. Propositional tyranny is, in some form, is almost inevitable for a target in the first couple of years of their harassment. I mean, it's just difficult, especially if you don't have anybody to tell you what's going on, or you start buying into all these things out there that I've talked about. It feels good to think you're chosen until you're not receiving the same stimuli, and then you're not chosen anymore. Or to think you're chosen feels good until it becomes the criteria of diagnosing you with a damn persecutory delusion and a delusion of grandeur. It doesn't work anymore. It's not good anymore. Okay? It causes propositional tyranny. That's not good. You don't want that. And I mentioned that gaslighting, it wouldn't even work on someone who is delusional and able to use your own intellectual capacity against you, and that compilement of data to confuse the individual along with the ad populum opinion about what's happening to you. And the worst aspect is you don't know who is who, and you're vulnerable because you're alone. The whole concept of becoming emotionally vulnerable, or believing in love or whatever, they'll try to get the target so bitter and so disillusioned they don't even believe in love anymore. They take you to that place. It's like, can the truth even be known? Well, yeah, there can be. There's a way that it's happened. And don't forget, love is conditional. One of the biggest tricks that I think the kingdom of darkness and some of the perps and poles, they'll talk about unconditional love, because it gives them the right to abuse you. And they will try to take you into that area of dissolution. Oh, it's unconditional. You want unconditional love. And they will use a failure in your life, or the kingdom of darkness will use a failure in your life. You need unconditional love from God because you're a failure. Well, no, I need a relationship with the Creator. And that's something that goes both ways. Right? And it involves your weakness and so on and so forth. But love is conditional. If someone is mistreating you, they're not allowed in. Right? It's like with the Lord, you have to have communion with Him. He's the gate. Right? He is the way into heaven. You don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, you don't get in. You're not getting in by works of the law or anything else. A lot of people talk about works. It's not by works. What are works? Works. It's not good deeds or anything. Those are works of faith, works of the law. You're not justified by works of the law, but you're justified by faith. And you're going to have some good works along with that, right? This Protestant delusion where people are, caught in this straw man argument. It's like that John 6 debate, right? No one can come to the Father unless the Father draw him, and whom He will draw in, He will no wise cast out. And you got to be one of His sheep, and you don't know Me because you're not one of My sheep, and now you're not one of the chosen. Way overcomplicated. Jesus was telling them who He was and why they were there, and why they weren't His sheep. Right? You were not taught of God and other prophets. That's John 6:45. Right before that, John 6:44. Right? I come down from the Father. I am the bread that came down from heaven. They wanted Him to make some bread. Right? Like they thought He was the bread wizard or something. And He said, you don't know who I am. I come from the Father. And He was also, emphasizing that He was the Messiah. Right? They didn't know who He was. They were not taught of God and the prophets, and they were drawn to Him by the Father, and they weren't His sheep because they didn't know who He was. He was telling them why they were there and why they didn't know who He was. Don't overcomplicate it, man. It's not a soteriological mystery. Pretty simple. Oh, it gets funny. You overcomplicate something, and people get drawn into these red herrings and straw man arguments. Right? It's like when targets fight over technology. If it's not demons, it's technology. It's the same thing. They've got technology. Sometimes they'll possess people, though, too. You deal with that. A lot of times targets are dealing with a demonic hive. It's scary. I've seen these things, and that's what I believe. A lot of people disagree, but now you have the problem of evil, right? You're not going to get around that. And then you have the whole idea of judgment and everything. Well, now the gaslighting is even worse, right? That's what they want. It's like all the different denominations and stuff out there. It's like, I don't know if I believe all that stuff. I think when you die, you just die. Well, you better live by the law of zero effect. Is if something is inconsequential, in other words, it has zero effect on the outcome, then you don't have to worry about that. The thing you have to worry about is the bad stuff, right? That would be hell, okay? Because if the Bible is true and you don't have a relationship with Jesus, you're going to go to hell, okay? That's something to worry about. If it doesn't exist, but you'll never know. You'll just die, and it doesn't change the outcome at all. You have absolutely no reason to believe it. You have no motivation to believe. That's called the Pascal wager. Right? You live like there is a God, and you find out there is, you're okay. You live as if there is no God and find out there is a God, you got a problem. Bad move. Law of zero effect. If you adopt the soteriological platform of Calvinism, it doesn't matter because God already decided all this stuff anyway. It doesn't change the outcome, zero effect. But if that's not true and he is not ordaining everything and Machiavellian style controlling everything, and you believe Calvinism, that means you believe the lie. Now it does matter. See? Law of zero effect. Very, very powerful protocol. I suggest you adopt that. If you're going to play chess, you better use it. Okay. Disciple 1, welcome to the live stream. And Disciple 1 is talking about the mark of the beast. I think it's something else. A lot of people look at the New World Order as the beast system, but they do not understand cosmic geography, and they do not understand the prophecies of Daniel. Interestingly, in the sense that this is Easter, you have the work of Dr. Michael Heiser, late Dr. Michael Heiser, in Reversing Herman. I suggest you check that out if you want to understand cosmic geography. But the basic jet flyover version is that we had a rebellion, the angelic rebellion, and then we had the incident in the Garden of Eden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which represented a government that the rebel angels tried to bring in, basically, if you get into the non-canonical texts. Then we move into the Genesis 6 account, where you had the infiltration into the genome of humans, where the sons of God saw the daughters of men were beautiful, and they started playing around with genetics. That's where you get the Watchers and the Mount Hermon incident, where you had the 200 Watchers that fell down in that area, following the example of Azazel in the Ethiopian Book of Enoch, and literally, capitulating with humans. And then you had the men of renown, so on and so forth. The whole idea of like the clash of the Titans. And then you move into the flood after the technological dispensation to humans. And then you have God disinheriting the nations at the Tower of Babel. Hold on a minute, guys. I'm doing some cooking here. Sorry about that. I suppose I can do it at the same time. And then God divided up the nations. That, when you look at that word divided, it will take you into Pentecost, which divided tongues of fire, the same word, same Hebrew word. So when God divided up the nations, when you look at Psalm 82, it talks about the principalities and powers being judged and immortality being revoked, and that they would die like men. Okay, if you're going to talk to a human being and say you're going to die like a human, that doesn't make any sense. But if you're a spiritual being or something like that, that is not subject to the weakness of man, and you were told that you're going to die, you're going to fall like one of the princes, you're going to fall like a human being, that means something. And then it says that God will take back the nations. Well, that's who Jesus is. So he's the seed of the woman promised in the Garden of Eden, the crushing one, right? And when you move in to what he was accomplishing, even with the 72 or the 70, depending on whether you're looking at the Septuagint or the Masoretic text, he picked the disciples apart from the 12. And he sent them out, and that's where you get a lot of people talking about the power over scorpions and snakes and all that stuff. But they went out and they declared the kingdom of God was at hand. Why? Because he is taking back the nations. That's a fulfillment of Psalm 82, right? And then we had Pentecost, the infiltration of the gospel, and that is the reversing of that whole scenario, right? And then you move in to the prophecies of Daniel, and you have the 70 weeks of Daniel, and then, of course, you have the first 7 that spans from 536 BC to 1948. And so they adopted the lunar calendar system in the Babylonian exile, which was really the first, infiltration of the spirit of Antichrist. The Antichrist is not really who a lot of people think he is. And that's one of the confusing aspects of this whole thing, is that people don't understand that. And they have a presupposition about what the Antichrist is. And they have a presupposition about the mark of the beast. It's a mark. But the New World Order, even though very powerful, in fact, they're more evil and scary than the Antichrist system or the beast system that's talked about. But basically, when you go back to the Tower of Babel, you see that the kingdoms began right after that with ancient Egypt. And so if you look at the interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream by Daniel, it starts out with Babylon, but we know that ancient Egypt and Assyria were before that. So what do we have in Nebuchadnezzar's dream? We have Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, and then we have the Ottoman Empire, the 7th, which got taken down in 1923, which was the Caliphate, which, of course, was the fulfillment of Revelations 3:10. A lot of people will take that into the pre-tribulation rapture, that one of the heads, because the heads are the kingdoms, right? Ancient Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, the Ottoman Empire. One of the heads had a deadly wound. What's that? Well, that's talking about the Ottoman Empire, which was taken down in 1923, which is reviving now, right? But when you look at the 7, calculating it from the lunar calendar, you have 7 times 360. There's 360 days in the lunar calendar. And you convert that by multiplying it times 0.9857, right? And rather than 2,520 days, years, what do you have? For the first 7, you have 2,484 years, exactly 536, because the decree came out in late 538 for the Jews to return to their Holy Land. And of course, they lived there for 70 years from 605, right? And it took them till 536 to reach that place to really be over as far as the 70-year exile. But of course, if you add 2,484 years to that, what do you get? 1948. It's not by mistake. That's not a freak anomaly. And the same thing happens when you look at all the other prophecies. You have to convert that. But the Antichrist was obfuscating the truth about Jesus, right? And you look at the mosque that's up there on that cosmic geography of the Temple Mount. What's it say? Jesus is just a prophet. God doesn't have a son. A denial of the Trinity. It's Antichrist. It's right there. In fact, in the middle of the 7, you had the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the wing of abominations right up there on the Temple Mount in 706, right in the middle of the 2,484 years and 1,290 days, years after the 583 stopping of the sacrifice, where they brought sacrifices up to the high places 3 years after the temple was destroyed in 586, and then they stopped that. 1,290 days, years converted by multiplying it times 0.9857. What do you get? 688 AD, the midpoint of when the shrine was being put on the Temple Mount with all that stuff on it that says God had no son. Wow, that's a coincidence. No, it's not a coincidence. Okay. There is a final 7 years,
But that's one of the mistakes that people make, is what they'll do is they'll jam all that stuff. We got a 7-year tribulation period. No, you got a final Shemitah, 7 years, that involves a great tribulation. And of course, as illustrated by Paul in 2 Thessalonians 2:1, the great and terrible day of the Lord. For that day shall not happen until what? What does Paul say? That day, regarding the Lord, the coming of our Lord and our gathering to him, that day shall not happen until there is a falling away, apostasia, and the lawless one is revealed, that man of sin, the son of perdition, Antichrist, right? And that final 7-year period is going to involve that. And about halfway through there, the mark of the beast is going to be instituted. And when it talks about all, it's not all without exception. It's all without distinction. If you're a king or a president or something, and you're over in that cosmic geography or wherever this expands out to, you're going to have to take it. No exceptions. It's not talking about people in Papua New Guinea or Eskimos. Everybody's going to get this chip or whatever. A lot of people believe that. And it's just my humble opinion. That's not the case. The New World Order is different. And when you capitulate targeted individuals into this, thing, because there's technology involved in gang stalking, I'm not going to deny that. And people assume that it's going to be the mark of the beast. The Antichrist, he really isn't that special as far as I'm concerned. And I do believe that he's going to be one of those prophets of Islam. There's going to be a guy that's going to be a hardcore caliphate, which will probably be similar to Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's over there right now. And they have the ideation to flood and take back that cosmic geography the size of New Jersey in the Holy Land. Right? They even talk about it. And that's basic prophecy 101. Right? But as far as the New World Order, that's different. And we're dealing with them right now. Okay? Very powerful. Very, very powerful. And they have weapons and technology that they don't have over in that area. But there's a lot of them. But the New World Order, that's where you get into the nuts and bolts of gang stalking. That's where you get into the secret societies, right? The foundations of Freemasonry. Then you've got the Illuminati, Rosicrucianism, the Committee of 300, the Council of 33, the Scottish Rite. Then you have the Royals and the ones in the West, and you got the purebloods and stuff like that. It's wild to see this stuff is real. Okay, there's a hierarchy running this world. But the New World Order is not the Antichrist. They might even believe that. They're going to be dealing with the Antichrist. And the fact that people are ignoring all the things that are happening over in the Holy Land over there, over in that cosmic geography, is exactly how that the prophecy that Jesus said that people aren't going to know. They're going to be marrying and giving in marriage. It's going to be like the days of Noah. That doesn't mean there's going to be a bunch of weird transhumanism. That means that it's going to be sudden destruction, right? Sudden destruction. People aren't going to have any idea, those damn crazy, people over in the Middle East. And then bam, next thing you know, they're just, it'd be like ISIS or something. Is they're doing a bunch of crazy stuff, like the October 7th attack, except worse, way worse. And the next thing you know, you've got some serious trouble over there. And then about right towards the end of that whole thing with the mark of the beast, the Lord's going to return. We don't know exactly when. Like I said, when you get into the Dead Sea Scrolls, we're in the last 50 or so years. Right now, we're in the first Shemitah. The last Shemitah could possibly be right at that 7-year time period. Interesting stuff. So, you got to watch out for that Reformation era eschatology, because people get confused, and that's why you get into the pre-tribulation. Well, how could we have a tribulation period and people not know that the return of the Lord is like a thief? What do you mean? Well, because people aren't. That's not what it is, right? It's not going to be that way. That they are amalgamating all the things in Revelations into the tribulation period rather than putting them after the cosmic disturbance in Revelation 6, right? After the sealing of the 144,000 Jews, right? Remember what Paul said, God has not cast off the people which he foreknew, and all Israel will be saved. What does that mean? The Antichrist is going to kill as many of them people before the return of Jesus as he possibly can. And he wants to get them to give their allegiance to a false god, and they will not be accepted into the kingdom of God. That harvest that Jesus talked about, you're not going to say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, do you see me come again? And that's the return of the Lord, right? And like I said, we're about 50 years away from that. Okay. Well, I mean, I can't say exactly when it's going to be, but according to the Dead Sea Scrolls, it might be sooner than that. Okay. All right. Well, guys, I think I'm going to have to get going. But we're going to recap here. And I've mentioned before, you guys have prayer requests or anything you want me to do a video about, put in the comment section. I just like to throw a prayer out there for everybody. That, the things that we talked about how, the targeted individual is discredited. You were isolated. You were blackballed. You were stonewalled. And a lot of you have been doing this for a long time, and you're still here. Some of you, probably like me, maybe you're even back from the dead. I mean, I was pretty messed up for decades. They thought I was a goner, laughing at me and toying with me. I was always going through delirium tremors, very addicted, hopelessly almost, I thought, to benzodiazepines. And even the doctors told me I could never get off them. Very brutal conspiracy on that one. And that if you take, not everybody gets this, but if you take a benzodiazepine every day, it is possible, because they did a study up in Europe in 1993, that you can form a protein in your brain, literally, in case you're out there stressed out and thinking about taking tranquilizers that are benzos, like I did. You take it for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden you start having panic attacks, and you become addicted to the stuff. But it's in a way where, and rather than going to treatment for like whatever 30 days or 60 days or whatever it takes, I think you can detox from heroin in 2 weeks. But when that protein forms in your brain, it sends signals to your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system and puts you into an acute state of panic and anxiety. The problem is it takes at least 2 years after the cessation of the drug for that protein to go away. Oh my gosh, you want to talk about a nightmare. Worst detox in the world, man. It took me 2.8 years. 2 years and 8 months, and it just stopped altogether. I didn't even know that information disappeared, by the way, and it was only out there for a very short time. A lot of corruption out there, and of course you can't sue, because anybody who makes a generic pill can't be sued now. They paid off a bunch of judges. But the thing is that the target individual is taken to a place where it's almost like you're coming back from the dead, right? And that's scary, because they don't like that. They don't like that. You remember what happened. They thought you'd be dead, gone, or discredited, or in a mental institution in a straitjacket, slobbering in the corner by now, but you're here. And they don't like it. And it can be dangerous. I just pray for all targets out there that are experiencing heavy stalking, they've experienced relief, and that individuals conspiring and scheming against you would be brought to light and exposed. They don't have the right to do these things. And we just pray that in the mighty name of the Lord Jesus Christ. When people are gaslighted as targeted individuals, their physiological and psychological mechanisms are turned against them. And they change the way you process information, and they get you to doubt yourself. Even just a little bit. But of course, that's the plausible deniability technique that surrounds gang stalking, right? I didn't do that. You're overreacting. And as long as they can get you to doubt, especially if you're needy, especially if they've got a group dynamic or use triangulation, that's all it takes. And, the mechanism that's out there as far as the conceptual framework does not allow the possibility of gang stalking. And so it's very difficult for targeted individuals to deal with that. And the paradox of it is that the more intelligent you are and the more sane that you are, the more effective that process is, because you're trying to compile the data together and make sense of something that is chaotic in a game. Not only do you waste your time like dealing with a troll online or something like that, but you get to that place where you are compiling information together, which just compounds the amount of options that are out there to the point where it feeds into that demoralization process that you are already experiencing as a target individual, taking you into disillusionment and possibly a psychosis or propositional tyranny. And you start believing things that aren't true, or believing that you can't even know the truth anymore. Right? A lot of people out there within the first 2 to 5 years either get provoked, incarcerated, institutionalized, or unalived. And we'll never hear about them. But your hope is in the return of the Lord, and you know that these people will be brought to light eventually. Not if, but when. And that the testing of your faith is crucial. You have to traverse the landscape that you are in, realizing the gaslighting conceptual framework that you were indoctrinated with was wrong. The people around you who are taking the masks off, they're part of it. And you have power as a targeted individual. But you have to remember that there's only really one way that you can win. And it's not giving them what they want. You can't become emotional. And don't dwell on this stuff all the time, guys. Distract yourself. Use dialectic behavioral therapy. And remember that, there's a lot of contradictions out there. And I've talked about that before for targets who are experiencing this type of tyranny, that, if all the things were true that they were telling you, there would be a lot more people experiencing this, right? But that's just evidence for you. If you were really that bad, or whatever they're trying to sell you, just look at the other people who are doing worse things than you and not experiencing gang stalking, right? Or all the secrets that they supposedly know about you, but yet out there in the world they are, trying to figure out, who this killer or that killer is, or this, mysterious crime or whatever. But somehow they've got all the stuff about you, and sometimes even in advance, because the world isn't what you thought it was. And there is a hive out there. There is a hive mind. There is a demonic aspect. There is technology involved in gang stalking. There are corrupt programs. There is an agenda. There is evil. But there is also a deliverer. There's also hope. And there's also a way that you can win and prosper. And that is to not play their game and realize the science around gang stalking. I'd like to thank everybody for their prayers. I talked about the fact, as far as a praise report, that my joints are doing a lot better. And I've been supplementing my diet with different things. I tried the carnivore thing for a while, and I didn't do it correctly, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. The whole idea of getting rid of all the vegetables and stuff in your diet just didn't work for me. And I started to suffer from it. And I noticed that when I started to put back the greens and stuff like that back in, of course, not eating the processed food. It's more of an elimination diet, it seemed like. But there is a way to do carnivore right. You just have to supplement and, eat shrimp and sausage, nose to tail, and liver. And so I didn't do any of that stuff. So, unless it was something else. And, that's another thing that targets deal with. You get covertly poisoned or something, or something's going on, maybe with direct energy weapons, and you start to suffer health-wise, and you think it's a health problem. It might not be. You jump to conclusions. You just don't know. But you try to assume the more reasonable thing and take care of something logically before you jump to the conclusion that it's gang stalking. And I found that they can gaslight you with that kind of stuff too, because now they'll just accuse you, and then it just brings in that flicker of doubt, and now you start slipping down the rabbit hole. But I'm back up to working out again. Praise God for that. Hallelujah. I mean, I had to start out with the bar. I couldn't even hardly move my elbows for a while there. I lost all the strength in my wrists and my joints. And now I'm back up to doing, 60-pound curls again with both arms, but I could do 20 or 30 of them. I couldn't even grab it before. So I'm thankful for that. Thankful for a lot of things. Praise God for my job, place to live. And like I said, there's things that we take for granted that are very important and valuable. But in the life that people live in this world, they're distracted and they're chasing after all these things, and those things are taken for granted. And you start having a health problem, or you become a target individual. You realize the importance of peace, of having a good night's sleep, of having reasonable health, and there are a lot of things for us to be thankful for. And the Bible says that God demonstrated His love for us on the cross. And you have to remember that. And I'd also like to thank everybody who helps support me and the channel. I've been doing, a lot of work. I've been working 50 hours sometimes for a crippled guy. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of running around. But praise God, I'm able to do that still. But I've had at least a 30% decrease in wages, and you guys have really helped out, and I appreciate that. Anything helps. Thank you for supporting the channel. I always put the link in the description. God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.